When most people think about discipleship, especially in a Western context, there's a certain image that comes to our mind. Common scenarios that we think of are Bible studies, small group curriculums, classes, things like that. And these are all great opportunities to experience discipleship. But what I want to do today is take a step back and take a fuller view of discipleship. And specifically, we're going to talk about how discipleship happens in the context of small group prayer. All right, let's dive right in, and I want to start out by giving a general definition of what I believe discipleship is. But before we do that, let's look at a foundational verse, and this verse comes from Matthew chapter 10, verse 24 through 25. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a slave above his master. It is enough for the disciple that he become like his teacher, and the slave like his master. If they have called the head of the household Beelzebul, how much more will they malign the members of his household? Now, I want to narrow in on that part where Jesus says that it is enough for a disciple to become like his teacher, because that's really the basis that I use here to define discipleship. So here's my overview of discipleship. Discipleship, in its broadest sense, is anything that leads people to become more like Jesus. Now, if we take that larger definition and we kind of break it down a little bit, we can categorize it into three different things. There's three directions that I really see discipleship moving. One is upward, one is inward, and one is outward. Upward discipleship normally happens in our connection with the Lord. It's kind of an intimacy with Jesus type of discipleship. Inward discipleship usually is the result of fellowship with other believers, and outward discipleship, this is more of our missional discipleship where we're engaging with the society around us. Now, when it comes to small group prayer, which is the topic of this video, I would say that it really emphasizes the upward dimension of discipleship. Oftentimes when we think about intimacy with Jesus, we think about our time alone with God, and a lot of our connection has to do when we're alone, whether that's devotion time, prayer time, Bible time, whatever it is. And I think that's right. That's really, really good that we develop those practices. There's a lot on the Sermon on the Mount about, going into the inner room and closing the door and praying to God. That's awesome. But I think that it's also really, really valuable to consider how small group prayer or praying with other people really results in some significant gains in this upward form of discipleship. You see, when you are alone with God, you have a very individual, unique relationship with Him. This is awesome. We want this to continue to grow. But one of the benefits of actually connecting directly with the Lord in the context of a group of people is that you don't only bring your own spiritual gifts and personalities and strengths to the table, but you actually get to benefit from other people's as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 4 through 7 goes into this, and we often take it in the context of gatherings or church or things of that nature, but I think that this could also apply to times when we're together in small group with prayer being the main focus. Here's what the verse says. Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are varieties of ministries, and the same Lord. There are varieties of effects, but the same God, who works all things in all persons. But to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. So when we come together, we're all worshiping the same Jesus, the same Spirit. We're all worshiping God together. But we have these different manifestations of the Spirit that I've actually seen come out in prayer gatherings that are for the common good. They actually are ways in which sometimes the weaknesses that we individually bring to God, they actually get kind of filled in by the strengths of others. And that's the beauty of being able to connect upwardly with God in the small group context. So as I mentioned earlier, the emphasis of small group prayer is really this direction of upward discipleship. But I want to look at the way in which small group prayer already also has like a comprehensive way in which it's hitting all three different realms or directions of discipleship. We already spoke on the upward dimension, so I'm going to leave that where it is, but let's now focus on the inward dimension of discipleship. And this is the aspect of us fellowshipping together with other believers. Now, when we're in a prayer meeting together, oftentimes it would be very, very common to pray for each other. And as we're praying for each other, I'm not sure about you, but for me, I get to experience this beautiful blessing. When I'm being prayed for, I actually feel closer and more connected to the person who's praying for me. I feel cared for, I feel loved on. And the opposite side is true as well. When I am praying for other people, I'm feeling like I'm really caring for them, I'm able to love them, and it's really a way for me to connect with a person, and in the context of like God being present in the entire experience. Another way that I've seen small group prayer really impact this inward direction of discipleship is just the community community that gets built in a small prayer group. I've been a part of one now for going on 6-8 months, something like that. And the connection that I feel with these people is deep. I think not only because we're seeing each other on a weekly basis, but because we're spending time together in the presence of God. And when we're together in the presence of God like that, there is just this invisible way in which He is connecting and uniting us as we're praying together. Let's now take a look at the outward dimension of discipleship. It could be really easy for us to forget that our prayers are actually making a dynamic shift in the world around us. We don't always have immediate results that correspond to our prayers, and so it can be easy to think sometimes like our prayers aren't accomplishing much. But the reality is that our prayers are ascending to heaven, and that the God of the universe is listening and He is responding, and that is the missional opportunity that we have when we get together and pray collectively in a small group. So if before this video you didn't think that a lot of discipleship happened in the context of small group, I hope I was able to change your mind as we really looked at the 3 different directions of discipleship and how small group prayer really emphasizes the upward direction, but also is really inclusive and comprehensive when it comes to some of the other directions, the missional, the outward, and also the inward fellowship with other believers as well.